This just made things very interesting as a wild report brings unexpected revelations to the Brock Boeser negotiations narrative. But first, a shocking reveal comes to light regarding an underreported Canucks free agent whose fate also remains to be seen. We're going to be breaking down all that in this episode of Canucks Digest, but first, if you want to join the nearly 7,500 subscribers we currently have on the channel, make sure to hit that subscribe button and the bell icon so you don't miss a single update when it drops. And with that, let's hop straight into the first topic of the day, which is an offer refused. So according to Rick Dhaliwal of Donnie and Dolly, Noah Juulsen approached the Vancouver Canucks recently to ask permission to speak with other teams around the league ahead of July 1st, and the Blue Liners' request was denied. This came out on a recent episode of Halford and Bro where Dhaliwal was a guest appearance. If you guys want to go and check it out, I've linked it in the description below. But he went into the meat and potatoes of it, saying that the reason it was denied is because the Canucks may or may not need Juulsen. It depends on if they trade a right shot defenseman for top six forward help, or if the Canucks move Victor Mancini or a Tom Willander for a second line center, the Canucks may have to re-sign Juulsen to be that 6-7 guy. Now, we've seen Juulsen get used in a different variety of ways throughout the season, but due to his injury and being made a healthy scratch on numerous occasions throughout the 24-25 season, Juulsen was limited to just 35 games with the Canucks while averaging only 16-17 minutes of ice time, which is his highest since arriving in Vancouver, but still wasn't crazy high in comparison to some of the other defensemen. With the logjam of Vancouver Canucks that they have on the blue line right now, thanks to the emergence of Elias Pettersson, DPD, and Victor Mancini, along with the club re-signing Derek Forbort, there doesn't appear to be any room on the NHL roster next season for Juulsen, and leaving the organization on July 1st would absolutely make sense. Despite the Canucks essentially using Juulsen as a backup plan if they are able to trade a defenseman this summer, it seems pretty unlikely that he'll return to Vancouver next season and he'll join another team where he's guaranteed to be in the lineup, albeit in a third pairing role each game. Now, this is totally understandable for Juulsen, where he recognizes that the writing is on the wall, and now the Canucks, in this scenario and another one that we're going to be talking about in a second, they've almost backed themselves into a corner where they have all the bargaining. They don't have all the bargaining power, but they do have all the power in this situation where they can say, no, we don't want you to talk to other teams because we might have other plans for you. Whether we want to use you or not, that remains to be seen. You're just going to have to stay in limbo as a result of it. Similar to another situation with Brock Boeser. But as far as Noah Juulsen, it does make sense for them to move on from him because realistically, he hasn't really been that bottom three guy that we needed him to be, that third pairing guy, where he has been more of a liability than an asset. Yes, fans do like him. He is liked by the locker room as well. He's a good team guy as well. He seems like a really cool guy in the interviews, but it just hasn't translated to a lot of crazy on-ice production. Could you attribute that to injuries? Yes. Could you attribute it to not getting a lot of ice time? You could do that as well. However, within this, it seems more of a liability for Vancouver going forward. Even if they want to use him as a backup plan, that's a very fragile backup plan to have because of the injury history, because of what he suffered last season, and with just not a big amount of production with the Canucks so far in his tenure with the team. So it does make a lot of sense for him to be on his way out of Vancouver. Just seems a little odd that the Vancouver Canucks would deny him that request when they ultimately do see him moving out of Vancouver after this season. Even if they are able to get some pretty good offer, or if he's able to get some good offers, they maybe want to see him, hey, we want to trade DPD, we want to trade Mancini. Who knows, maybe we can use it down the line, but that seems like a lot of power to exert over a player who may just want out because he wants to go somewhere where he can play every single game, which is totally understandable. But let us know what you guys have to say about this in the comments below. Are you guys seeing Noah Juulsen leaving as a positive or a negative for the team? And what do you think about the Canucks denying him that opportunity to talk with other teams before July 1st when the market does open to free agents? Let us know what you guys have to say down below. But that's going to take us into our second topic of the day, which is, so you're telling me there's a chance. So Dolly's appearance on Halford and Bro didn't really stop there. He jumped into the biggest part of it, which was the Brock Boeser news, saying that the Canucks keep in contact with his agent. they are showing interest, but it sounds like Boeser wants to test July 1st. If things don't go his way, I get the feeling that Boeser would be willing to talk with Vancouver again. Now, this is a very big switch there at the end compared to what we've been hearing with Brock Boeser saying that he is likely going to be out of Vancouver. The writing is on the wall. Get ready for it to happen July 1st and get your tissues ready for the tears. However, with Dolly saying here that while that could be a major possibility, if he doesn't get any luck on July 1st, there might be a chance where the Canucks do come knocking back on his door, or he comes knocking back on the Canucks door, I should say, trying to make a deal work out with what the Canucks are trying to do. And term is the big issue with Boeser. It's not money. Our team's going to give him 7 years. The Canucks are at 5 years. Teams won't have issues giving Boeser $8 million plus. It's the term that most teams are going to haggle over. And of course, when you're looking at his age, obviously he's getting up to where that age curve kind of tends to drop off at. So signing him for a long-term amount is a big investment, especially when we've seen a lot of guys sign a lot of long-term contracts late in their career and not even play even close to the end of that contract and have to get bought out through the result of the teams taking a hit on the final 3 to 4 years or so, or even more, maybe sometimes a little bit less in some cases. But in the case of Brock Boeser, I personally don't see him playing another 7-8 years. I think 5 years is a very fair amount of term to offer him, but within that, as the Canucks, you're going to be in a very tough spot, and as well as Boeser, where once those 4 years are up, or those 5 years, sorry, I should say, if that's where the Canucks are at, once those 5 years are up, Boeser will be much older. The market won't be demanding a much older player like that, and will his production still speak for that? This is something where Brock Boeser definitely wants a contract where he can retire on and ensure that he's not going to leave anywhere else and have to worry about going through another contract negotiation through the twilight of his career by the time that a 5-year contract would be up. So he wants to stay, whether he's staying in Vancouver or going to another team, the next contract he signs, he wants it to be his last, and is very evident with the amount of term that he is looking for. However, I think 5 years is a very fair deal. The Canucks seem to think that as well. I think that's very fair considering the age and the injuries with Boeser, even though in recent years he's continued to just get better and better despite the age. However, it still is a lot of factors at play within that. However, there still is that chance. Yes, Dollywall was saying that expect Boeser to check the market, but I would not rule out re-signing in Vancouver if Boeser can't get what he wants elsewhere. And if the Canucks can't land a top 6 piece by July 1st, he may not get what he wants on July 1st. I've been told everything is on the table right now. There has been contact between the Canucks and Boeser and his agent, as well as we just touched on earlier. So within that, there is a sliver of hope where we may not see heartbreak on July 1st immediately. Maybe it might take a day or two, maybe 3, for Boeser to kind of field the options, see if teams are calling or if teams are going to be willing to give him more term than what the Canucks are looking for. However, within that little bit of period, the Canucks fans might be holding on to a tiny little sliver of hope, maybe a bigger sliver of hope than we had in making the playoffs this season down the stretch. It seems like there might be a tiny little bit there where we could see Brock Boeser re-signing in Vancouver. And if that doesn't happen, where he tests the market and no one comes offering him anything longer than 5 years, it might go to show Boeser, hey, might be a little bit of a humbling reality check where you might not be able to sign a contract where you're able to fully retire off of that contract and not have to worry about signing another one at the late stage of your career. Or it could mean that maybe a lot of teams see you as only having 5 years left, 4 years left, and you kind of got to take that for what it is and view that as a challenge and a chip to have on your shoulder where you can try and defy that every single season, but as a result, that contract is going to keep winding down, and that value isn't going to really look like a problem with the increasing cap. However, there is so many factors at play here, and the biggest one is what Dolly touched on, is that the fact that Boeser felt like he was disrespected by the organization, but the player understands that Vancouver might be the only place that he wants his deal. And that is coming out of the fallout from the trade deadline, where the Vancouver Canucks seemingly openly said, yeah, we're going to be willing to trade Brock Boeser. We are trying to trade Brock Boeser, and no teams are willing to bite on it, just because they were probably saying, hey, he's in a contract year. Why would we give up something when we can go and try and just offer sheet him when we can go when the market opens and not have to lose anything for it except for money? And a lot of these teams, they can afford to take that hit. And with Brock Boeser, that's what a lot of teams are probably saying. And then in Boeser's case, you're looking at that going, okay, You tried to trade me despite being a contract year. So rather than just pay me there and give me the term that I want, you tried pawning me off for something that teams would have to give up for. Seems like a shady little bit of a back deal, but it is the business of the NHL. We've seen teams do it all the time. It's not just exclusive to the Canucks. However, it's one of those things where it's a bit of the bad part of the business of the NHL, and you hate to see it happen, in a bit of a power trip on the Canucks' part, where they were exercising that, and they kind of backed themselves in a corner where they came out and said, yeah, Brock Boeser's available. Teams, if you want to make an offer before the trade deadline, go for it. We're willing to hear it. Then Brock Boeser sees that, saying, oh, you don't want me? Okay, then that doesn't fall through. That falls through at the trade deadline. He stays in Vancouver as basically a half-season rental, and then he's looking at that going, I'm going to continue to push up my contract stock, not just in money, but also in term, trying to at least. But then he's also looking at that going, you tried to move me, didn't happen. In a contract year, I feel disrespected. Why would I want to come back? But that's why Dolly's saying here, the only reason why Boeser would necessarily want to come back is if he cannot get anything on July 1st. But what are your guys' thoughts and opinions on all of this? Do you think that I'm being a little delusional, thinking that there's still a little bit of hope that Boeser will be staying in Vancouver and re-signing if he doesn't get anything on the market? I'm not saying that he's not going to get something on the market. Me personally, I am fully expecting him to be gone on July 1st. I think a lot of teams are going to be willing to pay him what he's worth, but it's the term as well. I think I could see him taking something on a 6-year deal, maybe even a 7-year deal. However, I don't know if a lot of teams are going to be willing to offer him 7. I think 5 and 6 is a good sweet spot for a player like that. However, does give me a bit of optimism that if he isn't willing to take anything less than 5 years or 6 years, it does go to show that maybe there is a bit of hope that he comes knocking back on the Canucks door saying, hey, I couldn't get more than 5 years for other teams, and for the money that you guys are willing to give me, I'll stay. So maybe that happens, maybe it doesn't. We will see on July 1st. It's coming up very, very fast. So let us know what you guys have to say about this, and what are you looking most forward to on July 1st? What are you most least looking forward to on July 1st? Let us know about it down in the comments below. But that's going to do it for this episode of Canucks Digest. I've been your host, Griffin. Take care.